I love the hustle, man.
What's up, everybody? This is William from Before the Billions over here on the Black Man in Tech channel. I have another great interview for you guys today. Today, I have a special guest. You probably have seen him on YouTube with his own YouTube channel. I'll let him go ahead and get into it. But I want to give a huge shout out to Gabriel Agboruche. He is a consulting manager at Accenture. So, guys, go ahead and check out his channel. Please go ahead and help me with welcoming Gabriel. Hey, Gabe, how are you doing today?
Hey, how's it going, man? Hey, happy to be here.
Hey, yeah, I'm glad to have you up here. You are a special guest to the channel. I'm sure
Man.
that a lot of people are getting a lot of value from this interview. So I just want people who may not know who you are already, do you mind going ahead and telling us who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Gabriel Agboruche. I am an engineer by education. My undergrad is in electrical engineering, but later transitioned into cybersecurity, where I get more into that on my own channel. I kind of have a passion for technology, mathematics, cybersecurity, all things tech as a whole. And yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. And in my current role, actually, I work as a OT, which stands for Operational Technology Cybersecurity Consulting Manager. And I'm sure that William has more and more questions about that. And I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, so actually, can you tell us a little bit more
Yeah,
about what an OT is and some of the responsibilities that you have for that role?
absolutely. So within OT, so it's some synonymous phrases, right, in cybersecurity. And this is a specific type of niche. Like I know a lot of times you guys might have heard about blockchain or artificial intelligence or cloud, right? So those are some disciplines within technology and in cybersecurity. The one that I specialize in is that of ICS and OT, which stands for Industrial Control Systems and Operational Technology. Just think of oil and gas environments, nuclear plants, utility organizations, the electrical grid. That's the specifics of, or the specialty that I go into within my specific field in cybersecurity. So just think of industrial cybersecurity. And as an OT security manager, I focus on all types of engagements for those different environments. Whether we're doing penetration tests, where we're testing for vulnerabilities in different environments, whether we're doing incident response engagements. When a customer might get hacked, they call my firm in order for us to respond to what those issues are. Or we can do some proactive or some preparatory type of services where we're getting people's security programs together or doing an incident response playbook type of plan or threat modeling. I mean, the services go on and on, but that's my specific role, and those are some of the things I do within ICS and OT cybersecurity.
Sounds good to me. So I want to see, because you said that you studied electrical engineering, and how
Mm-hmm.
did you actually make that transition into cybersecurity? Like, what's your story on that?
Yeah, man. I'm gonna give you the short version because it's a long version. I'm gonna give you the short version of it. So, not too long after undergrad, I transitioned into the automotive field, where I was working for Ford Motor Company as what you call a wire harness design engineer. This is pretty much we were responsible for the electrical distribution within certain Ford vehicles like the Ford Fusion, the Ford Focus. I think at the time there were a couple of other different vehicle lines that I was responsible for. So we were pretty much designed what the wire harness or the wiring diagrams look like for these vehicles. Then we would travel down to Mexico and we would make sure that what we designed there in Michigan, where I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, and then we would make sure that what we designed there was exactly what they were doing on the plant lines in Mexico. It was a real cool job coming right out of undergrad. But I was wondering, but not wondering, but I was learning that I'm not going to get any additional learning opportunities. Pretty much the same thing I was doing was the same thing people 10 or 15 years my senior were doing within the same group. So I knew that I needed to get out of there. And not too long after undergrad, I'm like, with an electrical engineering degree, I can easily transition into a utility organization where then I transitioned to nuclear engineering. So then I started to get trained up in that within the organization I was working for. But then a big malware, a big worm, some virus happened in the Middle East called Stuxnet. And that pretty much caused shockwaves across the nuclear and the commercial nuclear industry, meaning my plant. So my plant started implementing all this cybersecurity guidance, and probably because I was like the youngest guy around, the newest guy to the organization, they started giving me all these cybersecurity projects. And that's really how I made my transition from more the traditional nuclear engineering into that of cybersecurity.
Okay. Now,
Mm-hmm.
are you glad that it actually happened in that way, that you ended up going into this route of
Mm-hmm.
cybersecurity, but at the cost of this virus that was created in the Middle East?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you can see on the news feeds everywhere that what company hasn't got hacked these days. I think one of the most recent ones was Uber, right? The Uber organization, they got hacked and they've been hiring for all new types of cybersecurity type of resources. So that's one thing that helps to drive the cybersecurity field is the fact that the bad guys are hacking. And when the bad guys are hacking, there needs to be more people that are hired to defend those organizations and that infrastructure. That same demand for jobs, that same demand for resources isn't the same within the nuclear field, isn't the same within traditional engineering. Of course, those are still very good and plausible job roles and career progressions over there, but cybersecurity is now, right? So I'm very happy that all those years back that I made that choice to transition more fully into cybersecurity, but still keeping a little bit of that engineering type of background.
Right. Now, I used to be in information security
Mm-hmm.
when I was an intern. So I know a
Okay.
little bit about it, and there was always this phrase that would go around that says a company,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much every company has been hacked. It's just whether or not they know it or not yet.
Oh yeah.
And I wanted to say, like, so what is one of the biggest ways that these companies get hacked? Now, I
Mm-hmm.
always heard that it was through social engineering, but what
Mm-hmm.
is your opinion on that?
I think that you're absolutely right. Probably, and we call this in cybersecurity incident response as an initial attack vector. How did the bad guys in, or patient zero, right? What was the initial way that the bad guys got in? And in many cases, it is through social engineering in the form of something called phishing emails, right? These are the emails that you tell your mom and grandma that when they get the email to not click them, right? Because they just clicking on links. And what happens a lot of times with phishing emails, these are malicious emails with embedded code, whether in the form of viruses, they could be Trojans, they could be worms, where as soon as you click them, they start to run rampant within your network and within your organization. This is the most common way that the bad guys get in. But there's other ways too, right? A lot of times where you might be seeing that a lot of different things are happening within tech, things called IoT, which stands for the industrial or the Internet of Things. And then within my field, it's the IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things. This is pretty much saying that every device, whether it's a phone, whether it's a heating system, or whether it's a refrigerator, it gets an IP address, it gets connected to the network, and it gets connected to the internet, right? So phishing emails and social engineering is one way, but another thing is connected devices, things that talk directly to the internet. Those are other ways that bad guys get in as well. But definitely, just as you said, social engineering is probably the number one way that organizations get compromised today.
Right. Even to the point where a lot of companies will send out fake phishing emails to just test
Yes.
their employees. Have you ever worked with that before, or do you know
Mm-hmm.
anybody who has?
Absolutely. So those are some of the services that I do, right, or have done before. These are called red teams. So what happens is organizations know, just like you mentioned, that either they're hacked already or they're going to get hacked soon. So what they do is that they hire firms like mine to come in order to find the holes, find the vulnerabilities before the bad guys find them. So they might bring in the firm in order to do a red team type of engagement, an offensive cybersecurity engagement, and that might involve that of a phishing campaign where professionals like myself, people who have signed contracts, who have gotten permission, might launch a phishing type of campaign within that organization to gain an understanding of who is clicking, why they're clicking, and to be able to respond to that with some level of training, with some level of increased awareness. Because the more that people are aware that the bad guys are out there, the less likely they are to click on some of those phishing links. So yes, that is some of the stuff that I've done before.
Okay. And have you ever worked with a SOC or a knock before? Well, of course you
Mm-hmm.
probably have,
Yeah.
but in if so, then could you tell us a little bit about what they actually are, and what they
Mm-hmm.
do, and how important they are to an organization?
Absolutely. So SOCs stands for Security Operations Centers. NOC stands for Network Operations Centers. These sometimes can be the same thing or they can be separate entities. The NOC is pretty much monitoring and keeping track of the different assets and the devices, how they're running, and if they're up, if they're down, and they are able to respond to different issues when there might be, say for instance, a switch might go bad or a router might go bad, right? That's the responsibility of the NOC. Now, the SOC has similar type of responsibilities, but they're mainly focused on security monitoring. If the bad guys get in, the SOC is supposed to be notified if something happens. They deploy tools and technologies in order to be able to detect when the bad stuff is happening so that they're able to respond adequately. Now, a lot of times I have worked with SOCs because we would do something called a purple team engagement. So myself, I might come into an organization and where I'm responsible for doing some of these red team type of activities. And then I'll be working with the SOC in order to see if they have detected any of the bad activity that I've been doing. So I might be doing some scanning activity. I might be stealing credentials and spreading them around the organization. I might be doing some data exfiltration. All of these things are things that bad guys do. And that when you're doing a purple team engagement, you're looking for the SOC in order to be able to detect those things. So after that engagement is over, then we, as the good guys, the ethical hackers, the red teamers, we are the people who give a report and tell them, hey, this is what we did, and this is what you need to do in order to be able to see these things in your environment. Whether there's PowerShell execution, whether there's different tools like Cobalt Strike that is running in their environment, whether there's different scanning tools like Nmap, like how can they detect and be able to prevent bad guys from this activity? So yes, I have worked with NOCs and SOCs, and more specifically SOCs in the purple team type of engagements.
Okay. It's all these colors, man. All these, the
Yeah.
red team, the
Yeah.
blue team, the
Mm-hmm.
red pill, blue pill, stuff like that. So, and
Oh
then I
man.
got. All right,
Yeah.
so I wanted to kind of get into this. So, because you were talking about your firm, your current firm that you work
Mm-hmm.
with, do you mind telling us, your company that you work with now, and then
Yeah.
how you were actually able to get that role?
Mm-hmm. So the company I work with now is called Accenture. It's probably one of the largest technology consulting firms in the world. I think we have like over 800,000 employees now, right? People that work for Accenture. So we're a massive force. And it's really easy to kind of get lost in the sauce of such a large organization. But what's very important is that you just kind of find your niche and niche down and really connect with other people within your niche within the organization. It's like a mini, I don't know, like a company country. So in Accenture, I work as a consulting manager where I have kind of dual type of responsibilities. So one, I work as an individual contributor on some type of engagements where I might be a technical lead or somebody who's executing the different services, things that I talked about, incident response and penetration testing and red teaming. But also I have a team, right? I manage a team of individuals who also do similar things, who execute on engagements and projects. And what happens is that larger organizations, I'm not going to name particular clients, but just large organizations, anybody that you could probably think of, we'll probably do some level of work for them. So yeah, that's a little bit about the firm, but that's also a little bit of what I do too.
Yeah. And actually, how did you get to that position?
That was the next question that you asked. So I got to this position by actually what happened is that so in my previous firm, I worked as a senior security consultant, right? This is pretty much a senior security consultant, right? So what happened was is that the recruiters from Accenture, there were some recruiters from Accenture that reached out to me via LinkedIn. So I didn't apply for this role. I didn't reach out to them for this role or anything, but I think it's because I had gained a bit of visibility within my field. So things that I was doing was I was speaking at conferences, I was contributing to conversations, whether on Twitter, whether on LinkedIn. And I think that visibility got out there to the point where where I got on the recruiters' radar to say, hey, this will be a person that will be a great fit for this particular role. So I was able to almost, because of the visibility I had within my field, I was able to gain a promotion, right? Because I went from senior security consultant to that of manager. So I think that is the way that I was able to get this role.
Okay. What type of deliverables do you have as a consulting manager?
It depends. Okay, so say for instance, I'm doing an incident, right? I'm responding to an incident, which is something that I just recently did this past weekend. Some of those deliverables would be things like a timeline, right? An Excel spreadsheet that might go over a timeline of the sequence of events that happened. Like this is where we see where patient zero is. This is the next step. This is the next step that the bad guys took. And then we also might provide them with remediations and recommendations that might come in the form of a PDF or a Word document to say, hey, you all need to address these things because this is how the bad guys got in. So whether it's PDFs, whether it's PowerPoints, whether it's Excel, whether it's Word documents, all of those are types of deliverables that we might give to a customer when we're responding to an incident. Or we will also do things like workshops too, right? So we might be doing some type of teaching about something or trying to gather some information about the customer's environment and their infrastructure in order to better address what their security issues are. So I know that I recently did like a firewall assessment. So I would bring in all these stakeholders within the organization for that customer, and we would have a workshop where I'm taking them through a number of questions, having a conversation about what their infrastructure looks like. They might provide me with architecture documents, and then if I have questions like, okay, is this firewall still there? What are some of the rules and the configurations for that device? Is it a current version, or is it something that you all are doing current? Like, are you all patching this? What are some of the vulnerabilities that go into you addressing your firewall rules and your configurations, right? Things like that would be another type of deliverable in the form of a workshop. So it can vary a lot.
Right. So also, I believe you were the person who told me about your current firm and how they won an award called the Magic Quadrant, right? The Gardner.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the Gardner Magic Quadrant. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about that? I believe it's for data and analytics service providers. I believe that's what the full award was.
Yeah, so like this Gardner report is something that it's like an industry-wide like technology, but they hit on a lot of different type of industries. I know specifically for consulting and tech, that's something that a lot of professionals and executives look at to understand where these firms might rank in comparison to their competitors. So this Gardner report, I think you're talking about the data one. I think we rank pretty high in that because we have a large investment in data engineering within a lot of those different technologies and organizations. And another thing I want to kind of make clear is one thing about Accenture. One reason why Accenture is so big is because we do a lot of acquisitions. We buy companies. Accenture buys companies, right, with specific expertise. So you think about like startups. If a startup organization is coming on the scene and they're creating waves, they have a unique type of technology, they have a particular segment of a customer base or a market share, Accenture would purchase that organization, bringing them into the Accenture fold, and be able to continue to develop that with additional experts and just kind of bringing them into the Accenture ecosystem. So when you talk about the Gardner report, I know that we rank high, maybe top in that data field, but also in managed services. We're actually at the top of a lot of those organizations for security as well. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense, but a lot there.
It does, and it leads into my next question, which is about how acquisitions can actually lead to more issues as far as security for a lot of companies. So I wanted to ask you, like, what is your opinion on that? Do you think that that's true, that acquisitions do lead to more security risks, or what's your opinion on it?
In some cases, right? So I know a lot of times there's there's a lot of conversations on YouTube about like relationships, and I think that that's the same thing as it concerns companies. Companies are also a version of relationships. So one thing that people say is that, oh, you got in a bad relationship because you didn't vet, right? But I think that that's also a thing as it concerns companies. When you aren't really vetting, so when you talk about security and company acquisitions, a lot of times when organizations don't go through a very thorough and almost forensic vetting process of organizations, their infrastructure, their security practices, their security infrastructure, then a lot of times what happens is that leaves holes, right? So you're bringing in a company who might do business in foreign countries, right? And those foreign countries might in some way have access to their infrastructure. One thing that you were mentioning before is that a lot of organizations are like, it's not about if we are hacked, it's like when it's going to happen. So sometimes when companies come in and they're acquired and they might already be compromised and they're brought into a larger organization, that leaves a hole. That leaves a bit of a hole into the larger organization because that company wasn't vetted properly, right? From their security practices, their security standards, and even seeing whether that company is currently compromised. So I think that there needs to be a vetting process to help to decrease that level of security risk to that larger organization that's acquiring. So,
Right. And
yeah.
have you ever worked with that before? Like worked with a recent acquisition of a company, and then you had to analyze the risk of this acquisition.
I haven't done that in a professional capacity, but I have done it. Like I think that was a project that was a part of my master's program, where we were vetting. Like we went through a process of vetting the security standards of an acquisition or an acquired organization. It's very interesting, but I haven't done it in a while. So, but I haven't done it professionally though. No.
Right. And now that we're on the topic of acquisitions,
Mm-hmm.
so you were discussing your previous company, which
Mm-hmm.
is Mandiant, right?
Yes.
And now they have been recently acquired by Google.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any opinions on that about this recent acquisition of Mandiant from Google?
Right. So I know that when I was there at Mandiant, I literally was right there. I left right before that acquisition news had came up. And people would ask me like, "Oh man, you could have been a Google employee today." And I'm like, I think I'm good, right? Because I think that a lot of times opportunities aren't always there, right? So a lot of times opportunities need to be taken advantage of when they present themselves to you and based upon the current situation. A lot of times people are kind of looking back and saying, I should have, could have, would have, or I should have done that, or I should have stayed here. I would have been in this position. I look at the information and the evidence that I had that was right there in front of me. And based upon that situation, I made an informed decision to move forward in my career progression going over to Accenture. So that whole shoulda, coulda, woulda stuff, I completely blanked that out because that has nothing to do with me because there is no way that I can predict the future. Number two is that I think that it is an interesting acquisition. So I know that when I was at Mandiant, we had a very firm consulting practice, right? Cybersecurity services consulting practice. That doesn't so specifically the part of Google that's acquiring Mandiant is that of Google Cloud. And marrying those two, Google Cloud and professional services in consulting, I'm really trying to understand what that looks like, right? I don't really know what that looks like for consultants. I mean, we were literally to the point where we were being sent out to different sites and doing walkdowns of systems, interacting with the systems, but Google Cloud doesn't seem to have that same working structure. Maybe they'll increase or add it to whatever they currently do, but I'm still trying to understand what that's going to look like. So it's interesting to see that the acquisition has come about, but I really think Google Cloud acquired Mandiant because of their threat intelligence. Threat intelligence is something that, so one example, and then we can move on to the next question. One thing that Mandiant was huge for is threat intelligence, and threat intelligence comes from front of the lines information. So earlier I was mentioning that we used to do penetration tests and red teaming engagements when I was there at Mandiant. The information that we would gain from the vulnerabilities and the holes that we found during the engagements, we would feed those into our intelligence feeds. So as soon as we found a hack, as soon as we found a bad guy, as soon as we found something bad that happened, we would feed it into what our threat intelligence. So it's almost real time. So it was like just a working instant. Whether we saw incidents, whether we saw red teams, threat intelligence would be so robust and so real time to the point where it was almost unmatched. And I really do think that that's what Google Cloud was looking to bring in, because the cloud combined with threat intelligence is almost a real time update of the threats and the vulnerabilities that are currently in the field. So we'll see about consulting, but I really do think Google Cloud acquired Mandiant because of their threat intelligence.
Right. And whenever I heard Mandiant's name, I always felt like it was like Superman or something like that coming in because he was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, they getting Mandiant,"
Yep.
you know.
Well,
Mm,
Mandiant was considered, I think it's still considered like the Superman of cybersecurity field because I mean, one of my major things that I did while I was at Mandiant is that I was an incident responder for the Colonial Pipeline incident. I don't know if you remember that, but
yeah.
Mandiant, and they were named publicly for that, but Mandiant got that incident. So we addressed that incident that caused like shockwaves across the oil and gas industry to the point where the TSA is putting out new regulations, government regulations, as a result of the Colonial Pipeline because it caused so much disruption to the U.S. Infrastructure.
Mhm.
So anyway, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I can
Actually,
go on and on. Mm-hmm.
Actually, I kind of want you to because I kind of want to know a little bit
Yeah.
more from what I remember. My pocket
Mm-hmm.
still remember the Colonial Pipeline hack.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like it still remember that. Like it's over here crying now. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but with the Colonial Pipeline, I think didn't they just settle with like the hackers because it was
Mm-hmm.
and actually the type of hack that it was, I believe they were like held hostage. What exactly is that type of hack that
So that
they
type,
were?
yep.
Go
So
ahead.
that type of hack is called ransomware.
Right.
So you think of somebody being taken or kidnapped, and then they send a ransomware letter to whoever the parents are or whoever the party is and say, give me this amount in order for you to get your person back or things back. Right. It's the same way with the cybersecurity. What happened is that it was thought of to be a Russian APT, which stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. Pretty much just think of a Russian bad guy. They were able to get into the Colonial Pipeline infrastructure, let off the ransomware. And what ransomware does is that it encrypts or it makes all of your information that's important jumbled to the point where you cannot read it, you cannot access it. So ransomware encrypts all the information in the network that it can touch and get access to. And then it sends a little note, a little text file typically, and it puts it on the desktop of organizations, or it might just be a screen that pops up to say, hey, in order for you to get your information back, because we ransomed it, you need to do these particular things. And that one specifically was, I think it was it 4 million in Bitcoin? I think they had to pay $4 million USD, whatever the equivalent of Bitcoin was. And they did end up paying it. They did end up paying it. So very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Yep.
Right, because I want to kind of go into that because
Mm-hmm.
is it that if you get hit with ransomware that you could go ahead and go through the steps that they tell you to, and then you
Yes.
still not be able to get it fixed?
There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee. So let me tell you, this engagement was crazy because I felt like I was in a movie, right? I was on the initial call with the customer. Well, I was on the initial call with Colonial when they were explaining what had actually just happened. And not only that, we had teams who were on Twitter looking for OSINT, people who were on the dark web where that particular threat actor resides. So there's so many different entities that are involved in this when you talk about a huge hack like that. One thing that came in was, I know you're mentioning you can follow the steps, but also one thing that was part of the steps was to understand, hey, is this this is crazy? Is this a bad guy that will actually unencrypt the information? What track record or what history do these bad guys have in actually letting go of the information that they encrypted? And that's where you get into your dark web research, right? So we also brought in another firm, which is a ransomware negotiation firm, right? So they are a whole, again, a movie, absolutely a movie. They were able to negotiate and give information about whether if we did pay or if Colonial did pay, if they were able to get their information back. So yeah, it's a lot of different things, a lot of different entities that were moving at the same time there. So, yep, you can follow the steps, but if they have a track record of paying based upon the criticality, based upon the business need, you might pay. So
Is there any sort of backing up of information, data, any any incident response, anything that they could have done in order to like, hey, we got hit with ransomware, but we have disaster recovery that's supposed to help us out in this. Is there any way they could have prevented this from happening?
I'll share what is commonly recommended, but I don't think you're asking me to, but I can't share like details about their infrastructure. So typically what happens is so every organization has like a disaster recovery program, right? But what that looks like practically, it's not, it's typically not practically in pace. A lot of times the biggest defense against ransomware is an organization having backups of all of their data, of all their information, and how often those backups happen. So organizations that have backups can just say, so say for instance, a bad guy compromised the machine, right? And they encrypted all the data within the last 24 hours. Say for instance, you have a 4-hour window that you do backups every single day. You probably had those backups somewhere, maybe in the cloud, maybe locally within some type of backup server. You can just say, oh, screw it. We're going to go ahead and kick you guys out. We're going to go ahead and take that computer offline completely, kick you out the network and just restore from our backups that we had just 4 hours ago. So that's one of the biggest defenses against ransomware, is that of having backups. But backups are expensive, right? These drives and these servers need to be maintained, right? You have to pay AWS, GCP, or Azure all this money in order to maintain the large amount of backups that you have. So it really becomes a business need at that point. Like, is it necessary that we back up our whole infrastructure every 3 to 4 hours? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So just a little bit more there.
Right. And especially with this data, you can run into like the petabytes of data, and it's gonna be huge. It's extremely expensive, especially when you get into cloud, and especially how frequently you back up all this data. So
absolutely,
but it does make sense. I mean, Colonial Pipeline most likely did need that.
Well, it did need it, right? Because they were Colonial Pipeline was responsible for fueling government and like a whole section of the United States, right? And that's one thing about cybersecurity. A lot of people don't think about it. They think about, oh yeah, cool hacking and this and that. Cybersecurity is a business enabler at the foundation of it. And that's why, the job market is super duper up. I think we have a 0% unemployment type of rate for people who are in the field. Like it's just not very common for skilled cybersecurity professionals to be unemployed, because there's such a high need and there's such a business need for these professionals to be able to work. So just a little bit more there for sure.
Oh yeah. And it makes me kind of want to switch, man. I'm like, man.
Listen. I'm a big advocate for it because I'm in it. So there are other places too, right? But everything I say is going to sound like is better than what it is, because I'm in the field, because I have very intimate relations with cybersecurity. So, that's just why it sounds so great. I'm a salesman for cybersecurity. You call me that. Yeah.
But yeah, so with that, there's also some things that did stand out to me that I kind of want you to talk about as well. One of them was penetration testing. And I kind of want you to go into the different types of penetration testing as well. So do you mind going into that?
Sure. So you get different types of, let's see where to start. There's a lot of different places to start. So a lot of times people look at red teaming and penetration testing as the same thing. These are very different. So not very different, but they're similar. Red teaming is when an organization might hire a firm or people or something in order to be able to come into the organization as quietly as possible, to be able to really emulate adversary activities. So they'll be using the latest and greatest hacks. They'll be using this quietest type of devices or quietest type of attack techniques. When you talk about penetration testing, that's just you're finding all of the vulnerabilities, no matter how loud you are. And when I say loud, you could think of kind of what you were talking about before in the NOC, right? The NOC is monitoring CPUs and different and downloading of services and downloading of information. They'll be able to see a lot of that network activity in the penetration test. But in the red team, it's very quiet. They should be probably almost imperceptible to a NOC or a SOC. But when you talk about penetration testing, there's different types, just as you mentioned. There's typically like a black box, a white box, and black box, white box, and a gray box penetration test. The white box means that the organization has given you all the network architecture. They've given you all of the desired assets that they want to test, the servers, the switches, the routers, the cloud instances. They give you everything. They say, this is what our organization looks like, and I need you to do this, find the vulnerabilities there. So you're giving all the information, and then you're told to find the vulnerabilities. Now, a gray box is somewhere in the middle, right? A gray box might be, you might be given limited information, right? But then there's information that you are given. So it's kind of somewhere in the middle of that and a black box. And a black box is you're given nothing. They just put you on the network, and you might get an Ethernet cable, you might get a VPN connection or something into their infrastructure. They might put you on a jump box and say, hey, go. All right. So those are some of the types of penetration tests: gray box, black box, and white box. White box, you're given everything. Gray box, you're given limited information. And a black box, you're given nothing and told to find the vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, isn't there such a thing as physical penetration testing?
Oh, yeah. So physical penetration testing is very interesting too. I've done several of these. So what happens is that, so it's the same type of infrastructure, right? Gray, white, and black, where you're given limited some information. I did one. The most recent one I did was like almost like a white box one, where I actually teamed with the physical security person within that organization. And we actually walked around the perimeter and the physical places within that site and then I was just questioning about certain things. So I know one thing. So let's take a step back. Physical penetration testing is the same as penetration testing, except you're looking for physical accesses that adversaries might want to take in order to get inside organizations' infrastructure. This might look like somebody trying to get into a data center. This might look like somebody trying to get into the electrical distribution center within an organization to cause some type of disruption. So, those are some things as it concerns physical penetration tests. But one thing that I found is that, so I was with an oil and gas organization, and I was with the physical security guy, and we were kind of walking the perimeter of the site. And they had previously were having some issues with protesters because when you talk about energy, organizations might have energy advocates or people who are protesters who might be trying to get into places to cause disruption because they're like, oh, why are you putting up this 5K tower? Because it's causing us all to have cancer, or it's causing the fish to die or something. You never know, right? So they would have people who would try to get into the site in order to cause some type of disruption to their satellite systems and whatnot. So one thing that they had was that, have you ever seen like those doors that you push, like those push bar doors? They had doors at the perimeter, probably in 4 different places in the perimeter. They had camera systems. The camera systems didn't monitor every single one of those doors. So I looked for the place where there was the door that was not monitored by the camera system. And then I'm like, okay, why is the push bar? So it was also a fence, like the gates with the holes in them. I'm like, oh man, I see a vulnerability here, right? So this is the same as a penetration test. I might see a vulnerability in the system because I took off. Let me tell you what I did. I took off my belt and I went on the outside of the gate, and I took my belt off and put it in one of the hoops, and then I put it through the bottom hoop, and then I was able to pull and open the door from the outside, right? Mm-hmm. So many times that's a physical vulnerability. Right? A physical security vulnerability, because if they were able to do that just with my belt, right, then anybody could do it. So one thing that's a recommendation there is that they take, there are push bar door like guards that go over the top and over the bottom, well, really over the top of those pushes, so that people cannot do things like that, like put things through the gates and be able to pull and everything. So yeah, very, very interesting stuff. But that's also a subset of cybersecurity.
All right. Yeah. Now, I heard this story. I did meet some penetration testers when I was an intern in information security. Pretty cool guys.
Yeah.
The only thing is that they told me a story about how they actually had the police called on them, and that is actually pretty dangerous as a physical penetration tester because you have to have a get out of jail free card. Where it's almost like you're in a movie where police are like chasing after you, and because you're really not supposed to be there. You're actually quite literally breaking in to a an organization.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
yeah.
exactly what it's like, right? Because the contract is between yourself and whoever the buyer is within that organization. It might be an executive, it might be the chief information security officer, it might be a security manager. But you know who doesn't know? It's like those analysts, those engineers, and those people who work day to day within those organizations. So a lot of times within a lot of organizations, they have a see something, say something type of policy. So if you see that somebody shouldn't be there, they might call the police. They might call the security for that organization. They might have you escorted out by police officers and have you arrested. Now, that get out of jail free card is that contract. You need permission, written permission that you have in hand via email or something to say, hey, I have been employed by this organization in order to do this. So yeah, it can get a little bit fishy there. It can get difficult, but yeah, that's that get out of jail free card, is that physical, written, signed permission to do what you're doing, because the people on site don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fishy with a PH.
Mm-hmm.
But
mm-hmm.
all right, so let's go ahead and get into a little bit about some of the different things. Like, I remember you were bringing up how you worked at Mandiant, and I forgot the exact position, the exact role that you worked in. But how is your previous position different from your current position now?
Yeah, so my previous position was a senior security consultant, where I was strictly what you call like an individual contributor. What would happen is that my firm would be, so I would have a manager and a director who would find work, right? They would build up the pipeline for the work for us to do. And they would assign me to different work, right? They would assign me to hey, I need to do a penetration test in New Jersey on Tuesday. It needs to last 2 weeks, and this is what you call like the statement of work. It'll go over all the information that's included in that engagement. So that's a lot of what I was doing. I was just doing the work that was assigned to me as an individual contributor. Now, the biggest difference in that role and my current role is that now I'm working to look for the work. I'm working to respond to customers. I'm working to staff different engagements. But at the same time, sometimes I can put myself on that. So I can kind of go between the individual contributor and the manager type of role. It's almost just like what you would consider like a step up, right? So I'm in it, like I'm intimately involved in the business of our cybersecurity practice within Accenture, where previously I was just executing on the work. Now I'm working on getting the work. I'm looking at developing the work or putting people into roles. And I'm also working at developing the practice. So I would increase maybe something, say for instance, we might be doing a incident response engagement, right? I might be the one to help to build up what questions that those individual contributors need to ask on that call in order to make sure that they're getting the information that they need in order to be able to respond. So things like that, just kind of more of a step up type of role.
Okay. And since you are in a consultant management position, tell me a little bit about consulting in general, because my understanding of consultancy or being a consultant is that you work at many different companies on different projects. And with that, you have a team that you work with, but your team may change depending on whatever company you're consulting at. Do you mind speaking to that?
No, I think you explained it perfectly. That's exactly what it's like. So you can be that type of consultant where you're working for a large consulting firm. So some of the largest consulting firms that put out cybersecurity services are that of course, Accenture. I'm gonna mention us, but like the big four consulting firms like Deloitte, Ernst & Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and KPMG. But then you also get like government consulting firms like Booz Allen Hamilton, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon. Though they also do very similar things, but they're more on the government or the federal government type of side. But yeah, they'll get the work and they'll staff you to different work, and you can be on different projects all of the time. So and that's where it gets a lot of the diversity and type of work. And that's one of the reasons why I chose consulting, because I can do a lot of different type of engagements with a lot of different type of organizations. I mean, we've been doing things in education, in automotive, in electrical utilities, in nuclear, which is my background, where I come from. But there's also a different type where you're doing your own individual consulting, where you can be a 1099 employee yourself, and that you're kind of selling your services to different organizations. Typically, it's smaller organizations because the big guys like the Big Four and all those guys, they have large enterprise organizations on lock, so they have a lot of that market share. But you can do things for like your local library. You can do things like individual consulting for maybe you had a connection with the organization that you previously worked for. You can be an individual consultant working on a contract for that organization. So a lot of times that's where you need to have a larger network of people that you can reach out to in order to build up your own business. So individual consulting is what I just mentioned, but you can also do exactly what you mentioned, working for a larger firm where they are bringing in the work and using their name to win business.
Okay. Have you ever done individual consulting before?
I did a little bit, yeah. So I was on Upwork a little while ago. Like I still dibble and dabble on Upwork, but I'm not really accepting a lot of business or anything. But yeah, Upwork. I was actually let me tell you, I actually worked on a book. So there's a very well-known cybersecurity professional in the field, and he went on Upwork and he was trying to staff someone who can help his writers to translate the cybersecurity language, right? So what had happened is that he hired a publishing organization or some type of organization to get him. So all he does is talk, and then that audio translates to words that the publishing company puts into a book format. Mm-hmm. So my responsibility was to translate that because the publishing company didn't have anything about cybersecurity. So I was brought in as a ghostwriter. So I was a ghostwriter translating the cybersecurity language for this very well-known cybersecurity professional. That's some of the kind of the individual consulting work that you can do. And they put me at a rate, and then all the hours that I did that I just charged to, and I got paid for those services. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And a lot of these writers, they have dictation, right? They dictate whatever their ideas are or their story. So that's what you'll see a lot of the time when people are publishing books. You'll see that they pretty much just have somebody write the book for them, and then hire people like you as ghostwriters. That's a good
absolutely.
Thing. Yeah.
That's why I don't mention it, because I was a ghostwriter, so I can't mention who the professional is. Yep.
But yeah, can't be.
But you know, rappers do it too.
Yeah, exactly.
Rappers do it too. Rappers do it too. Shout out to Drake.
You know what? I have been saying, I know this is completely different, but I have been saying this for the longest, is that the lyrics are nowhere near as important as the beat.
Yeah.
The reason why I say this is because the whole song is based off of the actual music, the beat, and then the lyrics can change at any time. That's why you have so many songs that are, sampled.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like you see it happen. Like that's what a studio session is. Like you get people in there in order to just kind of put things together in order to just put together some lyrics a lot of times, right? So you have ghostwriters right there in the studio trying to help the artist get to, I guess, that creative space. Because a lot of times they just be high and drunk, a lot of them. So, you need somebody a little bit more stable to be able to kind of put some direction into it. So,
right.
Yeah, they got ghostwriters too. Just like in cybersecurity, they got ghostwriters.
Exactly. All right. So one last thing, because we have been in a pandemic for the past 2 years now. And because of that, do you think that the cybersecurity space has grown since then?
I think so. I think it has grown because you can be a cybersecurity. So taking a step back, one thing that has come as a result of the pandemic has been remote work. Remote work has increased, tenfold across the tech industry. And that's actually one of the reasons why tech stocks and everything were going up and up and up during the pandemic, because the productivity was still there. I had been working remote since probably about 2017 to 2018. So I haven't been in the office in years and years and years. That was one thing that I found that was helpful for me to be productive and to grow in cybersecurity, is the fact that I could do so many things just from the comfort of my own home, or just with a laptop, and I could work anywhere. And I think organizations are also seeing that. Organizations have been seeing that more and more, to say, hey, I can hire somebody as a SOC analyst, security operations center analyst, that I just send them a laptop. I put tools on there for them to be able to do that work from home. Like I don't need to fly somebody in or give a relocation package or be able to buy office space in order for them to do that particular work. So I do think it has increased because people can be at home and be able to produce and be able to contribute to the cybersecurity field.
Right. With that, I'm going to go back to the knock and the sock.
Yeah.
Since you work from home, are they able to access your work computer in the same way that they would, if you were actually on the actual company internet in the actual offices?
Yeah. So what happens is that being at home, you typically sign into a VPN, virtual private network, and that VPN connects to the servers of the organization that you work for, and those servers are monitored by, from my organization, Accenture employees. So yeah, like all of the tools, and it's also another thing that runs because I'm always looking at the processes and everything that run on the machines that I have. It's something called EDR, endpoint detection and response. So there's an EDR agent that also runs on my machine, and it runs on everybody's machines that work for a company organization. It runs to be able to check to see, hey, is there malware? Is there something fishy happening here? There's something bad happening. So the combination of signing into a virtual private network combined with there's an EDR tool that's always running on my machine, yeah, they have access to my machine and probably can take it over at any time they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another thing because I remember when I was working in information security, and they would always tell me, "Oh, don't connect your phone to Google, like the Google chat and all this, because you're actually signing a contract that says, hey, they can take over your phone at any time, your personal phone."
Yeah.
Because you're actually giving them the access to. The only thing is that it gets rid of the convenience of being able to respond to messages from your phone. But have you ever heard of anybody whose phone has been taken over by a company, or have you ever has your team ever worked with anything like that?
No, not in particular. I haven't heard of any of that. Typically, companies are like they're looking for their business needs. Like they're doing this monitoring in order to keep things running in their business. So somebody's phone is kind of like low. I don't know. That's not a high priority for Knox and Socks to be able to monitor. Now, if you get somebody rogue, that's another thing that works in your SOC that has all of your access to your machines. But I don't know. My recommendation is just do work stuff on your work computers and do non-work stuff on your non-work computers. that really helps to make it very simple for you when you're working from home and other remote places.
Right. And it also goes back to something that you said way earlier in this interview about how when a device is able to connect to a network, and I've always heard that if you can connect to it, then other people can connect to it. Same thing for if you have a thermostat, a smart thermostat, you can turn it up, and then other people who may be able to hack into it can also then turn up your heat as well.
Absolutely.
So can you kind of talk about, because I think that is related to the Internet of Things. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So let me do it as giving an example. A lot of times what happens is that organizations actually, I wish I had my iPad because I would have been able to draw it up for you on the whiteboard, but would have been able to share. But it's cool. We could probably do it at another time. Okay. So what happens, so let's look at the example of having a home network, right? Your home network a lot of times is your home. You have and this is what I have here, like an Ethernet cable that connects to a router that a lot of times is provided by your internet service provider, like Comcast or some large internet service provider within your area where you live. That's your home network. Everything, so that home router would have Wi-Fi. It'll have the ability for you to connect with the wire. That's all of the things, right? So you might have a smart television that typically connects to your home router via Wi-Fi or via Ethernet jack. You might have your smart television or your smart, what is that? Your smart, what is this? Your smart refrigerator. Okay. You might have your smart refrigerator or your smart thermostat or something, right? So just as you mentioned, it might be that. The thing about it is that if somebody is able to get into your home router, getting like hack into your system. Because when people come over to your house, what do they ask for typically? They ask for the Wi-Fi password. What's the Wi-Fi password, right? The Wi-Fi password gives them access to your smart television, to your smart oven, to your smart TV, to your Google Home, to your Siri. It gives access to all of those things. So just like they can get access to it, a bad guy can too, if they are able to hack into your system. So a lot of times what's recommended is that you might do some additional security within your environment. You might be able to limit the amount of devices that are able to connect on your system. Say, for instance, you know that, okay, I'm never going to have more than 10 people or 10 assets or 10 things connected to my Wi-Fi. You can limit it to that. So even if a bad guy does get in, they won't be able to connect. Like that router will boot them off. Or say, for instance, might have a situation where if a certain amount of information is being downloaded or something, it can cut it off at that. So there's some different logic within your routing systems, or you can even bring in your own managed switch in order to deal with that too. So there are several things that could be done, but just as you mentioned, if you have access to it, if a bad guy has access to it, or if you have access to it, anybody can have access to it too. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, Gabe, so I want you to kind of talk about your YouTube channel as well.
Okay.
Tell us about what you do on there and how you
Mm-hmm.
actually started and why you started your YouTube channel.
Absolutely. So I have a YouTube channel. It's called Security. Funny name, but really the tagline is normalizing struggling in cybersecurity. So as I've been able to spit all this information and all this knowledge about cybersecurity, what it looks like in the field, what it looks like technically, services, and everything that I've done, it hasn't been a walk in the park. It wasn't just a very easy transition or easy way of me growing and learning in this field. And I struggled, right? And I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay with saying that I struggled. And I think that the one thing about my channel is that I want to normalize that. I want to normalize that it's okay to struggle, and that we can bring you from struggle and dispel some of those struggles so that you can become better within the cybersecurity field. So that's kind of what my videos are on. I give a lot of like entry level and like early career cybersecurity advice. I give a lot of my own experience, and I help to dispel a lot of the struggles in cybersecurity so that you can go from point A to point B and grow within your cybersecurity field.
All right. Thank you, Gabe. So is there anything else that you wanted to promote that people can come up and support you on?
Nothing else right now. Probably a course or something is going to be coming out soon. So subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell on the Struggle Security YouTube channel. But probably I'll do courses. I'll do consultation services. It's just that I've been super busy lately. I got a baby on the way. We just closed on a house recently. So it's just like I got a lot of life stuff that's happening. But more to come if you subscribe to the Struggle Security YouTube channel, and you'll be able to hear more about it there.
Yes, sir. And congratulations again.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
All right, then, Gabe. So that being said, I wanted to say I really do appreciate you for coming up, man. And if you don't mind, can you stay back after this and I'll close out?
Sure.
All right. So, guys, that was Gabriel Agboruche, the consulting manager at Accenture. We had a great conversation. I really appreciate him from coming up. Thank you guys so much as well for watching this video. Please go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And also hit that bell notification icon if you want to be notified whenever I make new videos on YouTube. Also, please go ahead and subscribe to Struggle Security on YouTube. That being said, guys, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I really do appreciate you.